In 2023, a New Mexico police officer drew his service pistol during a routine traffic stop. The weapon fired before his finger reached the trigger. Nobody was hurt. But within a week, the department had quietly pulled every one of those guns from service. No press release. The manufacturer called it an isolated incident. The officers called it something else. Today we're covering 7 handguns and rifles that gun owners, dealers, and professionals are quietly walking away from in 2026. Not because something better came along, because the market already made its judgment. And if you're holding one of these right now, you need to know before it costs you. If you want straight information about what's actually worth your money, with no manufacturer sponsorships and no industry relationships clouding the picture, subscribe now. 1 click. Free. And it might save you $500 or a whole lot more. 7 to 1. Let's get into it. Number 7. Beretta APX-A1. The APX, A1 checks every box on paper. Italian engineering, modern striker-fired platform, optics ready, retail around $400. It should have been a winner. The problem is the shadow it can't shake. In January 2017, Beretta lost the U.S. Army's handgun contract to Sig Sauer. The M17 went to the P320. Beretta was outcompeted. That's business. But the civilian market doesn't forget when your flagship military submission loses a federal contract in public. The APX-A1 launched into that headwind and never recovered. Secondary market prices sit between $250 and $280, used on a gun that retails close to $400 new. That is a 30% loss before the first round fires. Glocks, M&P 2.0Hs, and P365s don't do that. If you own one and it runs reliably, it's a legitimate firearm. But the secondary market already answered the question about whether it holds value. Number 6. Taurus GX4. Taurus built the GX4 to compete with the P365 and the Hellcat. Micro-compact, 11 rounds, priced under $300. For budget-focused buyers, it looked like a real option. Then came the documentation. Multiple drop-fire incidents were independently verified, not forum rumors. Video evidence submitted in civil proceedings. Body camera footage captured on official law enforcement record. The GX4 will discharge on hard impact with a surface without any trigger contact. The internal drop safety is not adequate for the platform. Active lawsuits are pending in multiple states as of 2026. Distributors in several markets are refusing GX4 trades at any price. Instructors are banning it from their courses on liability grounds. A pistol that retailed at $279 is now trading between $150 and $180 used. That's up to a 40% loss, and that's assuming you find a buyer. Stay with me through number 2 because it's the same problem at a scale 10 times larger with active state-level litigation. Behind it right now. Number 5. FN502 Tactical. FN makes some of the finest military-grade firearms on the planet. The SCAR, the 509. Their contract history speaks for itself. That's what made the 502 tactical situation so damaging. FN issued 2 separate safety advisories for the 502. First, a slide defect. Second, a documented risk of unintended discharge. The gun firing without trigger contact. 2 advisories from a manufacturer with FN's reputation is not a minor footnote. The 502 launched at $649. With both advisories completed and documented, it's settling between $350 and $400 on the secondary market. $250 to $300 in losses on a pistol sold as premium training value. If you're holding one without documented advisory completion, most dealers are declining it outright. Number 4. Kimber R7 Mako. Kimber built its identity on precision 1911 craftsmanship. When they entered the striker-fired carry market with the R7 Mako, the expectation was clear: that same Kimber-level execution on a modern platform. The R7 Mako was formally recalled for a defect in the firing pin block. The pistol could fire when dropped. That is the single most fundamental thing a passive safety system exists to prevent. A dropped gun does not fire. The Mako failed that standard. Retail price was $599. Post-recall with documentation, the secondary market has settled it between $350 and $400. Drop-fire recalls stick to a model's reputation longer than almost anything else. Owners who completed the recall still report dealers won't take it at fair trade value. The Kimber name could not protect this platform. Number 3. Remington R51 Generation 2. The original R51 was so comprehensively defective that Remington didn't issue a recall. They executed a full market withdrawal. Every unit pulled. They announced a ground-up redesign and promised the relaunched version would be corrected. The second generation still malfunctions. Extraction failures. Slides that crack under normal round counts. Frames developing stress fractures within standard break-in periods. These are not isolated reports. They are consistent across multiple independent testing platforms that evaluated production units. The final blow: Remington declared bankruptcy in 2020. The brand was sold. The company that stands behind those guns in any legally meaningful sense no longer exists. Parts for the R51 Gen 2 are not available through legitimate channels. When it breaks, and based on documented failure rates, that's when, not if. There is no repair path that costs less than the gun is worth. It retailed around $440. Secondary market value today sits between $200 and $250. The trajectory has one direction. Before we get to number 2 and number 1, subscribe right now. The next video covers the guns that professional buyers are quietly moving on before the broader market. Figures it out. If you want to know where the value actually is in 2026 and not just where to avoid losing money, you want that one. Hit subscribe. Number 2. Sig Sauer P320. I want to be precise here. Because Sig Sauer makes excellent firearms, and the P320 MHS variants in U.S. military service perform well. This is specifically about original commercial P320 configurations without the voluntary upgrade installed and documented, and it has become the most legally active firearms issue in the country right now. More than 100 civil lawsuits have been filed against Sig Sauer related to P320 drop fire incidents. That caseload is without precedent for a single pistol model in American legal history. In October 2025, the state of New Jersey filed a consumer protection action against Sig Sauer, specifically requesting a mandatory recall of affected P320 configurations. Sig has held that the voluntary upgrade program it offered in 2017 adequately addressed the concern. New Jersey filed in court saying otherwise. The documented incidents include active law enforcement officers sustaining gunshot wounds from holstered P320 EUS, guns that fired while secured in duty holsters with no reported trigger contact. Video evidence from body cameras has been admitted in civil proceedings. Forensic examiners have testified about the mechanical conditions that produce the failure. Distributors in multiple markets are declining P320 trade-ins at any price. A pistol that retailed between $500 and $600 is finding secondary market prices between $350 and $450, with the upgrade documented and confirmed. Without documentation, dealers in legally careful markets are declining the transaction entirely. When a firearm becomes legally toxic, the market prices that liability into every transaction immediately. And number one makes the P320 situation look like a footnote, because number one involves a company that had internal documents proving a fatal defect for 7 consecutive decades and kept selling the product to American families the entire time. Number one, Remington Model 700, Walker Trigger. This is the most important thing I will say on this channel. If you own a pre-2006 Model 700, this applies to you directly. The Remington Model 700 is the most produced bolt-action rifle in American history, the basis for the military's M24 sniper platform, trusted by millions of American hunters across generations. The name carries cultural weight in this country that almost nothing else in firearms can match. It also carries the most documented safety cover-up in the history of American gun manufacturing. Internal Remington engineering records from 1947, 15 years before the Model 700 went on sale, describe the Walker trigger mechanism as, direct quote from court-admitted documents, very dangerous. Those were Remington's own engineers, their own internal words. Dated 1947. Merle Walker, the engineer who designed the mechanism, testified under oath that he proposed a corrected, safer design in 1948. Remington management reviewed it and rejected it. The reason documented in internal correspondence: the safer design would increase manufacturing cost by 6 cents per rifle unit. 6 cents per unit. In 1975, internal documents reference the same concern again. In 1994, Remington evaluated a full recall on financial grounds and chose not to proceed. The production line kept running. More than 150 lawsuits followed over the following decades. Children killed on family hunting trips when the Model 700 fired while the safety selector was moved from safe to fire, which is exactly how the mechanism was designed to function. Adults injured under identical conditions. Every case met with the same Remington defense: user error. Through discovery in multiple cases, evidence was presented that Remington maintained a policy to destroy internal test results documenting the trigger defect. That is not an allegation. That is sworn testimony and court-admitted documentary evidence. In 2014, Remington issued a voluntary recall of 1.3 million Model 700 and Model 7 rifles with the X-Mark Pro trigger, produced between May 2006 and April 2014. A different trigger than the Walker mechanism. The Walker trigger itself, present in every Model 700 produced before 2006, never received a formal mandatory recall. Remington declared bankruptcy in 2020. There is no active warranty. There is no manufacturer support. No recall in progress. In the professional used firearms market, a pre-2006 Model 700 with the Walker trigger and no documented trigger replacement carries an effective resale value of 0. Not reduced value, 0. No legitimate dealer accepts it as a trade because acceptance creates liability. No informed buyer completes the purchase for the same reason. Millions of these rifles remain in American homes right now, passed down from fathers to sons, sitting in gun safes, being oiled and cleaned for next hunting season. If you have a pre-2006 Model 700 and don't know with certainty which trigger is installed, take it to a qualified gunsmith before it leaves the house. Not because I said so, because the documents Remington spent decades trying to keep out of courtrooms prove they knew, made a deliberate financial decision not to fix it, and sold it to American families for more than 50 years anyway. That is number 1. 7 firearms. 7 situations where the market, the courts, and the documented evidence all reach the same conclusion. The question is whether you act on that before it costs you money or before it costs you something worse. If someone you know is sitting on any of these without knowing what you just heard, share this video. No sponsorships, no manufacturer relationships, no industry access that changes what gets said here. Subscribe. We'll see you in the next one.